Thank you. For the second party of this session, we will have a presentation of the other deliveries from the Executive Committee. And we start first with the Green Enabling Project. I will ask Emily and Ori to come on stage. Both BNP Paribas and Natixis were coordinators of this task force. Over to you.
Thank you, Valerie. Hi, everyone. On the Green Enabling Projects Task Force, this year we worked on implementing further and providing more explanation and guidance. 3 main deliveries for this year. The expected by many introduction of green enabling guidance within the GBP. 2025 update, the publication of an illustrative example checklist that Emily is going to present to you, which was a very essential piece of work this year, and a few dedicated Q&As that have been published as an annex to the Green Enabling Project Guidance document. Just as a reminder for those of you that may not have fully followed the topic, the Green Enabling Project Guidance has one essential aim: look at current eligible categories under the Green Bond Principle in full value chain. I think that's the way we should be summarizing it, meaning that we look at the entire value chain while we recognize that value chains could be complex, and as soon as you look at green projects in value chain, you expose yourself to challenges of multiple end use, as well as challenges of double or triple counting. A green enabling, and what that guidance does, which I think is an innovation in the work we have done so far within the GBP, is that we went quite far in defining what the type of diligence that we would be expecting for a project to be called green enabling on the back of 3 main pillars. What we call specific eligibility criteria, which is basically looking at how necessary the project is to a green end use and or application, how transparent the demonstration of that necessity should be, and last but not least, the most challenging part, the end use of that green enabling project or activity. So on the first element of the deliveries.
So one comment that we received last year is that actually the link between green enabling and the Green Bond Principles was maybe not clear enough, right? So one element that we did is provide additional clarification on how the 2 documents actually link. So when we look at the categories themselves, we clarified that it's very much recommended that the green enabling projects are not an 11th category under the Green Bond Principles, but they are really captured by the existing category that are already in the document. And so it is recommended that they are actually being mapped, right, to clearly identify what green project they are actually enabling. We also included then a clear and explicit reference of the green enabling document into the Green Bond Principle 2025 updates. So now the link should be more straightforward. We also added, as already as mentioned, a Q&A on the fact that obviously the green enabling project should anyway fall within the Green Bond Principle of the ACMA, and that double counting should be carefully considered through transparency, but also through using, for example, the guidance handbook that is being published already and available. On the second item that we worked on this year, so that's the checklist, illustrative checklist. And so the objective of that checklist is very much to support issuers and actually users to use the guidance by actually putting together a set of very concrete examples. And so what we did is that for every single criteria of the Green Enabling project document, we used examples and then counter-examples were relevant to try to really explicit how this guidance document can be used. So obviously the examples that we used are illustrative purposes. It's not a definitive answer to the question that people are actually wondering. So that's very much an illustration, but that we hope will be helpful. The example that we have picked for this year will be for the mining and metals sector. So we chose lithium mining. For the chemical and specialty chemical, where we focused on specialty chemicals, the ICT and telecommunication network. So here we picked smart mobility, and finally manufacturing of industrial parts and components. And here we picked the manufacture of grid power cables as illustrations. As part of this document, you will also find another tab where we made public the various references and sources that we use to actually compute those examples. So again, they are usable resources, but they do not aim at being exhaustive. It's really to make sure that we were transparent in terms of the information that we decided to use, and a plethora of additional resources can be used for providing or demonstrating alignment with the Green Enabling project document.
And I guess what we could say is that this checklist is not a full creation of this year. It was actually the approach we took in the first place to design the guidance. So we took examples iteratively with the working group and ran through the various criteria to make sure we were running the right reasoning when we were designing the guidance. So here it's more the fine-tuning and I guess the publication of our working documents, if I can put it that way. So as part of the Q&A, as usual, the Q&A we addressed is the result of the survey that Valérie and the Secretariat have led, just to understand what market participants were after in terms of better understanding or usability topics when it comes to green enabling. There was quite a chunk of expectation with regards to the definition, so the ones we've mentioned around how does that fit with green bonds or green bond principles. There was also interesting and very valid questions around the difference between green enabling and supposedly non-existing but relevant concept of transition enabling, which is a very valid question. So I guess if there was one message to go away with on the clarification we wanted to bring this year, is that green enabling fits into the green bond principles, should match one of the green eligible categories, and is definitely oriented towards the value chain of green eligible projects, activities. There was a lot of questions as well, a lot of appetite for us to go a bit further on the end use, which is also a very fair question. It fueled a lot of debate within the working group over the last 2 years, or 2 seasons, very fairly so. So we tried to provide as much guidance, both in terms of the content and the transparency expected. Questions around disclosure and reporting. We've mentioned the double counting element, and same idea around the allocation reporting between green and green enabling and how you articulate them. And then a set of sector examples. So I think that's the main topics that the Q&A are addressing. And last but not least, we are planning after the summer a dedicated webinar in the series of webinars that have been launched this season to address green enabling, answer to all the questions.
Thank you. Now I'm calling Katie and Malika to present the impact reporting work. Yes, hello everyone. And then we're here to present the work that we've been doing on the development of the social bond framework, the harmonized framework that we've been developing to try and align it with the green bond framework. This is my slide. Which way? No? Sorry. Yes, so we've studied this work and then already managed to update the access to affordable housing, but this year we've been quite efficient and then worked on the access to essential services. So the work that we've studied will hopefully go on, and then we will be able to introduce core and other indicators and to make sure that it's more aligned with the green bond impact reporting framework. The reason is that, for example, in the case of BNP Paribas Management, we've launched the social bond fund, and it was quite difficult for us to work with the metrics because the metrics currently focused on the output, outcome, and impact, and the SDGs mainly. But we're trying to identify the core indicators and other indicators to make sure that we provide a further guidance to the issues.
Yeah, so before I get into the content of it, just want to say a huge thank you to the working group members. There's a lot of active engagement this year, and whereas last year we did affordable housing, this year we took on essential services, which, like Malika said, has 3 components to it. So it was quite a lift this year compared to last year. Also, huge thanks to Colleen Keenan from the World Bank, who's our co-coordinator, but isn't here today. So the guidance document takes a similar structure to what you saw with the affordable housing that was added last year. So sector guidance and then indicators. In the sector guidance, what we're trying to do is to provide some more examples of the types of projects that would fall under each of the project categories, and also some illustrative target populations that might be relevant. So in some cases, it's a bit more straightforward, but in health, for example, it really could include quite a range of projects. So whether that's healthcare, health infrastructure, like hospitals and clinics, but also devices, technologies, pharmaceuticals, public health, healthcare financing. This is quite a range. And so when we're looking at indicators, we want to pick indicators that are relevant for all of these different types of projects. On the target populations, again, not exhaustive, but just trying to get a sense of what are those target populations that you might commonly see. So whether that's low income, remote communities, unemployed, the context, obviously, of each particular project is paramount, but what we're trying to do is really just lay out some of these target populations for each of these categories that you might tend to see. So the indicators, again, takes the same structure, trying to mimic what is in the green framework with core and other indicators. The core indicators, you'll see we ended up with about 5 or so, give or take, for each of these categories. But we really started with a really long list from all of the working group contributors. And what we were trying to do when we were narrowing this list down is really try to encourage harmonization. So narrowing the list as much as possible. At the same time, as I said, trying to be relevant across all of these different types of projects that you might be seeing. We wanted indicators that would be easy to aggregate across the portfolio to address some of the issues that investors are having. And of course, something that would actually be feasible for issuers to do. So when we came up with this list, that was kind of what was guiding us in the process. So the indicators that you'll see are somewhat high level. So number of students, number of people treated, number of grants, loans, those types of indicators. But it does encourage issuers to disaggregate for the target population. There's also included in the guidance we encourage issuers to also provide additional breakdowns for the particular context. So what service or product that you're offering, for example.
just to give a bit more of an insight around the type of impact that you're having. But for the core indicator itself, we kept it at a very high level. We also encourage issuers to really disclose the methodology. Some of these indicators we realize may have to come up with some calculations to be able to put them together. For example, converting a number of hospital beds into a number of people treated. So it's really encouraging issuers to disclose how they're going about any calculations that they're using. The other indicators, same as last year, focus on affordability, accessibility, and quality. There might be other areas, but these are the three big buckets of other indicators that we included. And these are meant to provide additional insights around the type of impact that the project might be having. And while for the core, we really looked for indicators that could be aggregated with the other indicators, you may see a little bit more variety. So for education, for example, see teacher-student ratio or % reduction in schooling costs. So again, a bit more of a variety there. And it's not included here in I just want to add, the general sense of all of this is harmonization around quantitative indicators, but qualitative reporting is still very important when it comes to social, and so that's something that's also included in the guidance, that shouldn't be forgotten as we do try to work towards these indicators.
Yes, thank you, Cassie. And then so the impact report in social bonds is basically really the focus for us in terms. Sorry? Oh, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, so it's really about the target population, and then the process in terms of how we collect the data, and then how we identify those gaps in this target population. So I don't want to go through the slide, but we will definitely go towards the next sector, and then there will be the poll in terms of asking you, and please give us your opinion in terms of which should be the next sector that we should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you very much, Malika. Now I'd like to invite Paul O'Connor and Laura Dout from Crédit Agricole and JP Morgan. They were co-coordinator of the working group, of the task force, sorry, on sustainability-linked loan financing bond, together with the LMA and NIB. Over to you.
Many thanks, Valerie. And I just want to start off by thanking Laurent, my co-coordinator, and also Angela from NIB, who's out there, and also Gemma from the LMA, and also to everybody who participated in the task force. So just as a refresher, what are sustainability-linked loan bonds? So effectively what we've done is recreate the format of the green use of proceeds structure, or the use of proceeds structure. But instead of having projects being financed, we are using the proceeds to match to a pool of sustainability-linked loans. And we are effectively replicating the way we do green bonds in the same sort of format. But the key to this is to think about it in terms of a pool of sustainability-linked loans, which is then matched to a bond that a bank would issue. The other elements of the structure are typically similar in terms of explaining to investors how you actually are going to select the sustainability-linked loans, and then obviously how you're going to manage the proceeds before they're allocated against the portfolio, and then obviously critically the reporting component. So that's just by way of a refresher on how this structure works. In terms of what we did this year, we reached out to the group to solicit questions, and we gathered all the topics that came back, and we tried to group them as best we could into kind of themes. And these are the themes that you'll see here on this slide. So we sort of aggregated them under kind of 4 headings, looking at the benefits, and then looking at how we establish the pool of sustainability-linked loans, dealing with an important subject around on what basis should loans be disqualified from the pool, on what basis they could be readmitted, and also some guidance on reporting. So these are the I guess, the answers that we drafted to the first topic, which is, what are the benefits of doing these things? So the first benefit that we agreed on was, they help create incentives in the financial system that wouldn't otherwise exist. So, what is the motivation for borrowers to actually improve their sustainability performance? In some markets, in some jurisdictions, there are incentives, but in many markets, those incentives are absent. So what we are saying here is that anything we can do to create incentives for borrowers to actually improve their performance is worth doing. And banks can help sort of corral all of this and integrate it into the financial system. The second topic here, moving along to the right, complementing use of proceeds bonds. A lot of banks have done green. A lot of banks have done social or sustainable. Many banks have exhausted their pools of assets and need to build them back up. This is a way for them to continue to highlight the ways that they can contribute to the emergence of a sustainable economy. It's a new tool in the toolbox, effectively, and it's particularly useful where borrowers are what you might call asset light. They don't have a lot of projects to finance. The business model is asset light, and in that context, this tool can be helpful. Moving along quickly, I saw Laurent looking at his watch. Engagement and leadership. This is also a way of banks highlighting to the market, what they can do in terms of engaging with their borrowers. Banks are typically very close to their clients, and they do have that kind of conduit, that dialogue with clients, and they can bring these tools to their borrower clients and help them understand how they can, pull the various levers within the business to improve their performance. Investor engagement, obviously something new for investors to think about. Investors already buy, a huge amount of bonds issued by banks, and this is a way for investors to kind of endorse what the bank is trying to do with its borrower base in terms of promoting sustainable development objectives. And then another topic, moving along the bottom here in the middle, enhancing the SLL market robustness. Sunlight is a great disinfectant, and if you are aware that you're going to go out to the market with a bond that effectively messages what you're doing with your sustainability-linked loan pool, you better believe that you've got a robust pool of sustainability-linked loans, right? Because you're going to be potentially challenged on the quality of that pool. So I think, as a way to enhance the robustness of the pool that we've got, these instruments can be very useful. And then lastly, transition finance, sustainability-linked loans, already commonly used in the market to message a commitment to Paris-aligned trajectory, for example, or decarbonization. And, this is obviously an instrument that can kind of feed into that transition concept. But I'll pass over to Laurent.
Thanks, Paul. I think we had two questions related to the topic of transparency. Trying to assess, guide the market to what is the right level of transparency that is required for issuers. The first thing and very important point is that the overall philosophy is that issuers should be providing to investors disclosure as comprehensive as possible so that investors can really assess the sustainability quality of the underlying portfolio of SLL. That's really the philosophy. We also acknowledge that in a number of cases, it's not possible to have full disclosure on the loan for confidentiality reasons. So the idea is also to acknowledge that aggregating information is also doable. And last point on which we insist as well is being consistent in the reporting and trying to have, to a certain extent, a consistent reporting year after year when issuer reports. There is also one element that is not necessarily specifically on the slide, but that relates to one of the approach that is possible under the guidelines, which is approach 1, where the issuers disclose a number of elements on the KPIs and SPTs. Here we clarified one element, is that, as you remember, in an SLLB, you need to have one single sustainability objective. So here the idea is to guide the market to have full disclosure of KPI and SPT on the one related to the single sustainability objective, while maybe having a little bit more flexibility on the complementary or the additional KPIs. We also had questions around the financial characteristics of the SLL, of the eligible SLL, and what is doable. Of course, in line with the SLL principles, generally the variation of the margin is probably the most commonly used, but we also acknowledge that other approaches are possible, and we know that in a number of cases, public sector issuers might have loans where there is no variation of the margin, but different structural characteristics that are used, so we believe that it's also acceptable. There was also question related to the performance of the SLL portfolio. Again, transparency is key in terms of the framework, giving the transparency around the criteria for disqualifications and having a transparent process when it comes to disqualifying. Also, having an annual reporting on that tracks the performance of the eligible SLL portfolios, and also communicate when there is some discretions. One thing that is also important is when there is borrowers that have failed on their SPT, is really communicate and disclose the approach, both for assessment in the case of the disqualification, but also in case the borrowers performs again, so how you want to under what condition you allow an SLA to be added back to the portfolio. Also, we believe it's important to have that issuers communicate on the size of the portfolio, and also the potential variations or number of loans that have failed in terms of SPT. Last point around reporting. I think it's very clear that on the allocation reporting, as much information as possible, in particular on the sectors, the geographies, etc. We also had question on the outcome, and I think it's important for issuers to give informations, in particular around the KPIs, and potentially group them, aggregate the data per KPIs or at least per thematic. We also had discussions on potentially what is possible in terms of impact. So we believe that, yes, for some KPIs where you can aggregate the information, issuers can aggregate the data to come up with some measurable outcome. However, we guide them towards being a little bit prudent in claiming any impact.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Thank you, Paul. Next topic is a sustainability linked bond working group. I'm calling for Samuel, Mary, and Orit to present the outcome. Both Natixis, PIMCO, and JP Morgan were coordinating this working group.
Hi everyone again. A few things on the SLB working group this year. The KPI registry, as you all have in mind, is a very instrumental delivery of this working group. We have worked on a number of things. So on the social, so basically, the way we worked was to ask all working group members for user feedbacks. So what is it that what are the comments on the existing registry that you want to share, or the questions or the updates? So we had a whole lot of comments. And we have updated quite a number, or significantly, or more or less significantly, but quite a number of KPIs. So on the social KPIs, We focused, for now, on the already covered social themes, so just transition, value chain, or access and community, where to enhance, clarify, integrate additional core or secondary KPI suggestions. And there were a number of other social KPIs, social topics that were started to be covered and will be published in the next season, to be defined whether it's pre-conference or pre-next AGM, depending on where we are. And among those, the DEI topic and the working conditions topic, for which we had very significant contributions, but that still needed to be discussed with the full working group. Biodiversity has also kept us busy in full coordination with the work on the practitioner guide that was presented a bit earlier today. The idea was to integrate quite a number of feedback that we had on the existing KPIs on biodiversity, integrate additional, but also in the user guide of the KPI registry, remind the idea that is developed in the practitioner guide that the way to address nature can and could or should be quite holistic in terms of looking at the various pressure, as long as they are impactful from a nature footprint perspective. So we created really a very direct link between what the practitioner guide is saying and what we are trying to put together in the KPI registry. On the oil and gas sector, there was a number of updated and added KPIs, a number of which suggested by the methane abatement working group, which has published a document today, right? Yesterday. Sovereign KPIs, new KPIs added, especially on the social on the social front, and then minor adjustments here and there on the note to user to the materiality matrix, based on the feedback. So as always, we have worked based on the initial survey with all the expectations, and then along the way through the feedbacks of the working group members. Yeah. We felt it was relevant to come back to the notion of core and secondary KPIs, because there was a bit of debate, both as part of the ExCom and as part of the working group. So as a reminder, core KPIs, so the reason why we've made the nuance between core and secondary KPIs in the first place was to say, this is meant, the KPI under the ESLBs are meant to be core, relevant, and material, merci. Core, relevant, and material, with the idea of being able to capture a significant, if not holistic, part of the sustainability issues of a given issuer. Hence, in the realm of ESG KPIs that a given issuer could be monitoring, a very strong difference between the materiality, the relevance, and the coreness of each of them. So the idea was really to make a difference. And the way we decided to pass that idea across was to say a core KPI needs to be material, relatively mature, and sufficiently holistic, and or able to be meaningfully measure the performance improvement towards sustainable business operation. And core KPI have been limited to 1 or 2 per sector, and in principle, they can be used on a standalone basis for an SLB issuance. Doesn't mean they must be used as a standalone. They can be used as a standalone, so they're material enough. Yet, we from day one recognize the relevance of a number of secondary KPIs that are monitored by issuers, that do make sense, that are either concerning only a part of the company or only a part of the sustainability agenda, that do have a spot on the SLB market, but they're less material, and they as a standalone, were not seen as a good representation or as a big enough, a holistic enough representation of the strategy, the sustainability strategy of the issuer. So sometimes they're not easy to benchmark because they are related to very internal methodology, or they may lack comparability with peers. Having said all of that, which is not new, there still has been a bit of debate around some KPIs that in the KPI registry are looked at as secondary, that are still very important, should have a spot as a standalone, should be able to, bundled with a few others, represent the sustainability strategy of an issuer. So we have added into the SLBP or Q&A? Q&A. Q&A and note to users, I think, of the registry. A small paragraph which is trying to clarify and it was, I think, one of the trigger of the discussion was the ability to do nature-related SLBs, where all the most of the historical biodiversity KPIs were identified in the KPI registry as secondary. So the idea was here to really remind that yes, you can the combination of one or more secondary KPI can work if it together captures a material dimension of the sustainability issue and the theme of the bond. I'm being too long.
So similar to the KPI registry, we have made a number of enhancements to the other key resource of the Sustainability-Linked Bond Principles Working Group, which is the Q&A. And that was based, by way of background, based on the feedback that we had received. So just as a brief reminder, there is already an extensive Q&A that we have enriched over the years, but there was particularly strong feedback regarding the opportunity to provide clarifications and small additions as it relates to sovereign and the adaptation or adaptability and relevance of the Q&A for sovereign issuers. Accordingly, we have made a number of modest edits to the existing language and added a couple of elements to it, so touching on a number of areas that are particularly relevant to sovereign. A case in point that is also particularly topical given the transaction we saw this week in Europe with a sustainability-linked bond issuance incorporating a step down. So now there is an explicit acknowledgement of the sovereign context and the connection between the tax revenues that have essentially raised the question of the relevance of incorporating a step down in addition to a step up. You will find a number of references as well to the regional context and needs of sovereign issuers, the fact that for data that are reported by sovereign, given the data quality concerns, there is an encouragement to externally verify this data produced by national statistics, as well as a number of other items on this page that I'm not going to address in detail. Bottom line is that the Q&A is even more updated and relevant to support future SLB related to sovereign issuers. And then we have mirrored what Orif has described in terms of incorporating the nuance associated with core versus secondary, bearing in mind nature KPIs or also methane KPIs, and the fact that there is not necessarily a binary sort of frontier between core and secondary KPIs, but it's more a question of degree of materiality when selecting the relevant KPIs. Then it was previously highlighted that we are always looking at ways of innovating to provide useful content to support the SLB market. So given the fact that we already have such a rich guidance, Natixis, JP Morgan and PIMCO, we have essentially worked together with the ICMA Secretariat and a number of stakeholders that you see listed on this page to provide practical content and guidance or complementary considerations, observations in relation to the market practices based on the existing ICMA guidance. And we have started this series of webinars with, number one, an introduction to the market, looking at the key sort of trends and opportunities of growth going forward. Then we had a more specific webinar focused on corporates in particular, and the question of the materiality when selecting the KPIs, taking the example of Scope 3. And we are working on a sovereign dedicated SLB webinar. Very briefly, I felt it might be useful to share a couple of takeaways in relation to these webinars. Number one is that based on all the insights from all these organizations, we essentially have highlighted the fact that the SLB market continues to innovate, grow, and mature. Importantly, there are more and more encouraging examples in the market of the solutions and concrete examples of issues that have overcome some common challenges for SLBs. And the example of Scope 3 is particularly meaningful, and we had an issuer demonstrating their positive experience in relation to that. We had also the Science Based Target Initiative providing an update on the guidance that they are developing to be also more accommodating of the market realities associated with these materiality definitions. There was also a highlight from a number of comments and questions on the growth ahead for the SLB market, supported by the appetite for transition finance and the fact that this forward-looking instrument is particularly relevant. And the last point that is also quite relevant is the fact that this is a key year for sustainability-linked bonds, given the observation dates and the potential step down associated with a number of transactions. And we have taken the opportunity as well to highlight the fact that all these sort of step downs and targets that may be missed are also highlighting that the market is working, that there are examples of issuers that had ambitious targets in the first place, and that it should be seen as a positive element rather than necessarily a sort of challenge when looking ahead at the growth opportunities.
Positive for the SLB product, not necessarily for the pace of transition, I have to say. Maybe, and we should have done it also on the green enabling. Thank you very much to all working group members. We've had very significant contribution on the KPI registry by many, and there's still plenty to come. And it's very much the same on the green enabling project as well. There's been a lot of engagement, so it's very nice.
Thank you, Rit, and thank you, Samir. While there are no deliverables today, we would like to hear from Anjali and Agnès what's going on within Transition Finance Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I think we'll probably be the briefest because it doesn't look like a lot happened, but you can imagine at this moment in history and in society and definitely in the markets, there's a lot of debate around what the next evolution of sustainable finance means. And it's coming from different places in different parts of the world, and we're a global institution. So we've been thinking a lot about what our role is in sort of the Amber projects, right? So what else we need to do in the transition that doesn't fit into the market precedent that we've all worked to create around green or green enabling now. And so we've had a lot of debate, which is why you don't see a huge amount of deliverables, because I think there was a lot of discussion that needed to happen with the Secretariat. The Secretariat is working extremely closely with the LMA. I think you must all be aware that the LMA is working actively on transition guidance, should be coming out very shortly. It's really important to us at ICMA to have strong alignment with the LMA and to move in conjunction with that. So that's also sort of slowed down the pace of which we could bring something. But we are working now really actively to think through what is the role of the ICMA XCOM and working with the Advisory Council, working with all the members to think about how we want to discuss transition, Amber projects. There are a lot of parts of the world that are ready to put out transition labeled bonds, as we all know. I think collectively we've decided there needs to be some guidance on how to make sure there's good governance around that and sort of our perspective on how we can improve it. So Thank you very much to all the coordinators. We had BNP Paribas Asset Management, BNP Paribas CACIB. We've had a lot of work and kind of feed in from the active members as well. And I think Agnes is going to present what some of that work has been and potentially what it might look like for the next few months.
Yeah, so as Anjali said, no deliverable. Sorry to disappoint maybe the working group. Some of you might kind of expect a lot from, indeed. But nevertheless, a lot of work from the working group and all the contributors. This is, again, quite a large, actually, working group. So we divided into 2 work streams that effectively looked at 3 elements. What are the challenges when we talk about climate transition finance? And in that respect, they have, at the sub-working group, identified a number of issues. Interestingly, when you look down at the underlying challenges, and Anjali touched upon it briefly, but it comes back very often to what are the characteristics of the eligible project that would be considered as acceptable when you start talking about transition finance. So very often the challenges that were identified were boiling down to this topic. Then the working group started looking at what would be the prerequisite when you look at transition finance at entity level. And surprisingly, that's really expanding on the work that we already have, obviously, in the Climate Transition Finance Handbook that all of you are hopefully familiar with. So it's really working further along those lines. And the work stream 2 has been delving into the project level. So it's been working on an indicative mapping tool. It's summarizing what are the market precedents, what are the taxonomies these precedents were leveraging on. Here it refers to regional referentials as well, which effectively means the roadmaps, and looking per sector what have been the technologies that have been financed already linked to this concept of transition. The workstream didn't set upon building a new taxonomy, just to be clear. We know effectively what we can do within an ICMA forum, and we are definitely not taxonomy specialists, but it's really leveraging on what is existing already. So what we are looking at is definitely further work between now and the Tokyo conference. We put a kind of, a soft wording because it's always difficult to know with that working group what we'll get to, but definitely, next meeting is on November 6th, as Nicola was highlighting in Tokyo. So thank you very much to all the participants on the working group.
Thank you very much. So to finish with all those presentations in the governance of the principles, in addition to the executive committee, the task force and the working group, there is an important group of stakeholders under the advisory council, which is led by Divya and Frederic. Over to you.
All right, thanks a lot. So we're here to present a little bit about the topics discussed and debated in the advisory council this year. But before doing so, we thought we should just go through some of the principles of this forum. Because, now we talked a little bit about transition finance. And, of course, this is a forum where there's a possibility both for members and observers to, reach out and to have a discussion about sort of future market developments, you could say. And to also reflect about developments happening in different geographies and so forth. And we will go through some of the topics that has been discussed, but we also wanted to mention sort of a little bit the background of the Advisory Council, sort of that this is a forum for advising the Executive Committee of the principles. It's a way of sort of increasing knowledge of the market and to further enabling further engagement with members. Members are, have a possibility to be here for 1 year. The focus areas for this year has been, to have an outreach maybe to emerging markets. And there's also been an encouragement to, for corporates to be part of the council. So here's a list of members participating, both in terms of who the members are and who the observers are. So you can see a little bit more about who's part of this group. Maybe you want to say a few words about the actual discussions held.
Yeah, I think the best part about the discussions in the Advisory Council is that it allows us to have a bit of a free-flowing dialogue on the topics that are top of mind for all of the constituencies that participate in the market. Obviously, acknowledging that XCOM has the 3 constituencies of investors, issuers, and underwriters, the Advisory Council then brings in official sector representatives, our SPO provider community, the rating agencies, obviously key in the credit market, as well as many members of the nonprofit and civil society world that participate in our market in one way or the other. It's a forum that allows us to both, as Frederick was saying, unearth new topics, but also make sure we have sort of a continuing dialogue on topics such as how to develop and grow this market in the emerging markets, which has been a focus for us at XCOM ever since the beginning. This year, as a part of our usual work in putting together the Advisory Council, we again sought feedback from Advisory Council members on what they would like to focus on. And the top 3 topics, with over half of the membership reflecting interest. The first one was really climate finance, and particularly transition finance for hard-to-abate sectors and emerging markets. The second was impact and allocation reporting. And then the third was to look at some of the new developments from a regulatory perspective, including taxonomies. And so you'll see that flavor already reflected in the agenda that we lined up with our Advisory Council sessions already in this term. So the first 2 meetings very much focusing on that topic of transition finance. It has been a topic that we have discussed in this forum in the last session of the Advisory Council as well, and we continue to bring new voices from our community in the Advisory Council on that topic. And then our upcoming meeting will then touch on that other important topic, particularly in relation to market developments from a regulatory perspective and taxonomies. So we will continue to mine those topics of interest that the Advisory Council has suggested over the remainder of the session, which will run through the end of the year. And as always, it's an opportunity for us from XCOM to both inform the broader market community of what we're working on, but also to learn from the broader market community. For example, some of the presentations that we've had in the Advisory Council on some of the structures that are emerging, such as the nature debt conversion market, or some of the work that we have seen in the advanced or nuanced features of transition-related taxonomies have been very informative for the group as a whole. Also, maybe a reminder, we have an important constituency represented here that brings in people from other parts of ICMA, such as the legal counsel and securities professionals. And so we do seek feedback from them on specific topics throughout the year. Mm-hmm.
So if ever you doubted of the breadth and the depth and the richness of the topics you cover, hopefully your doubts will have been dispelled. We're now coming to the open session of Q&A. We haven't mentioned, I think, yet that there's also a number of you who are online. So there's not just the audience here, we've got a wide audience, and I think it would be really interesting here to have a as interactive as possible discussion altogether. This year we are innovating a little bit because, as you will see, Valeria and Agnès are going to take you through a number of polls. We're going to hope that the technology is going to work. It's online, again, fingers crossed. But the working groups have put together a number of targeted questions. So, we're going to go through the polls, and that's going to help structure the conversation. But don't hesitate as we go through it. If there are topics which aren't covered, things you want to raise with us, this is the moment. It's really useful for us to sort of get your unvarnished feedback. This is a closed event, so don't stand up and start waving flags or screaming at us. But please don't hesitate to tell us what you really think. Thank you.
This year, we are changing the way we are asking questions. It's not coming question from the audience, but the executive committee would like to ask you to answer to few questions. But after the result, we can have interactive discussion, of course. So if we can move to the first one, if you can flash the QR code on your mobile phone. The first question is about nature-related bonds. Are nature-related projects becoming more of a priority for your organization, your clients? So please vote.
So this is accessible online as well, yeah? It should be. Okay.
It should be.
Okay, good. So I must say, it's not meant to be a test, and apologies if it will feel like it by the end of the questions. But they should be all very interesting as takeaways, I think. So.
Almost 71 participants. Maybe we can...
Yeah, so I think, well, first, because, I mean, I will say that on the nature-related side, the coordinators and Simon have been really brave because the questions are very direct. So if we had kind of, you know, a heavy balance kind of on the kind of no and the focus is definitely on other priorities, that would have been kind of obviously quite disappointing. But as Nicolas said, we do want kind of the feedback because that's what's targeting kind of the next iteration, obviously, of the ExCom work and the working groups. So I think it's interesting. It's yes on close to 50%, yeah, and when you combine to not yet, but it will be, it's an overwhelming kind of 75%. So
maybe we can move to the next, the second question. Do you think the new practitioner guide will lead to more nature team bonds being issued?
I think when we'll get to 70, I think we can, yeah, so 72, I think that's probably kind of a good marker. So I think at this stage, maybe we just congratulate Simon, the IFC team, and all the contributors effectively, at least that was something that that should be positive, at least in giving clarity of what everyone can look at when it comes to nature-related projects.
The next two questions are related to the Green Enabling Project. With the first question, which sector do you think will most benefit from the Green Enabling Project guidance? It's a multiple choice question, so you can select all that apply from you.
And as a reminder, these are the sectors that were already identified effectively in the guidelines. And the checklist that Oris and Emily were highlighting for the example, they are drawn from those sectors. So that's the sector that the working group had identified from the get-go. That's why we've highlighted as well other, I don't know if we can see the answer if nobody is voting for it, but you know, if there are other sectors you think are important, do not hesitate to reach out probably to Valérie to flag which one you had in mind if you put other. Okay, but mining and metals, and I think, Orit, when you suggested first the working group, you use metal and mining as examples. So clearly there is a sort of consensus here.
The next question, if you haven't used the Green Enabling Project guidance since its publication last year, why is that? Do you feel you needed more clarifications? Needed to better understand how it links to the green bond principles, didn't feel it was applicable to your sector or client base or mandate, or found it challenges to identify the green end use? Again, it's a multiple choice question. You can select all that apply.
Okay, so I think that's probably something we would have expected in the sense that as we all kind of followed in the refresher, this is really looking at the upstream segments of your green projects. So it will be really dependent on kind of, what our clients do or what your sector is. So not so surprising. Now, on the second, needed to better understand how it linked to the green bond principle. Hopefully, this is what has been addressed. Found it challenging to identify the green end use yet. We don't have a silver bullet here, unfortunately. And the clarifications, hopefully, do go and see the Q&A. So.
Sure. Next question are about impact reporting for social bonds. And the first question, what are your biggest challenges related to social bond impact reporting? Multiple choice question.
Okay, so when so obviously just to clarify, as Valerie was saying, the working group coordinators proposed those questions. When I saw this one, I thought definitely the select all that apply, we will have people probably select all of them. and potentially this is what it appears here, but what we hear, and I suppose maybe in the top line, difficult to aggregate impact across a portfolio, we may have quite a few investors finding it quite challenging when you get social bonds that cover different types of projects to then aggregate a metric at portfolio level. So all the rest, I think, is kind of effectively what the working group is trying to address. So again, those questions, thank you very much for the 70 plus that do try to answer them. They are really useful to give indication for the future.
Speaking about future, the next question is related to which project category would you like to see addressed next after affordable housing, access to essential services? What should be next? I think we will change our plan. Okay. I don't know. I can't remember, Malika. That was not our plan, was it?
Yes, I think it was our plan, but we also need to add the digital access. So it will have a lot of subsectors. So good luck to us.
Thank you. Next topic, sustainability-linked bond. What would help to increase investor interest in the sustainability-linked format? Multiple choice question for the different options.
Yes, on the first one, I mean, obviously the question is phrased from an investor perspective. I guess everybody can answer what they think investors might want to see more. The first answer on increased financial incentive to meet targets, I think this is where definitely there will be an asymmetry in terms of what issuers and investors are prepared to see probably in the market. So it's good that it's a bit more balanced, I think, in terms of views on what will make the investor demands actually greater for the product.
Okay. Next question, still related on sustainability-linked bond. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for sustainability-linked bond going forward?
So, okay, I'm glad to see that we are still having kind of everyone on the topic. You have 2 more questions after that one, and I think we are almost, already 75 plus. So that is an interesting and good segue, I guess, into the next questions. I think we would have expected maybe something a bit more balanced, interestingly, from my perspective, so that's good to see.
Come back to the result.
So here we move to climate transition finance, actually. I mean, maybe self-explanatory. And again, following up from the points we were highlighting with Anjali on behalf of the working group. Okay, so most people are quite decisive here in terms of the answers on some of the questions. So here, 67% on yes. So, okay. Question was, would you want to see more light green amber projects being financed by the label bond market? We use light green and amber because, people use different terminologies on that.
And if we move to the last question, and if you answer yes or maybe, what do you think is missing for this to happen?
Okay, as we reach kind of close to the 70, that's the mark we get. On the so that's interesting again because it does. I mean, the working group, as I said, is quite large, but definitely it's interesting that the guidelines on how to assess transition at project level is the one that comes the most often because that's the underlying challenge that was referred to most often by the working group as well. So. Thank you very much. I think that's the last question. Everybody has done so well because it was 10 questions and some of them with very long possible answers. So well done. But to me, it's very interesting to see, and at 70 plus people answering each time, I think it's a really good indication. We don't do the annual consultation anymore, so that's also quite good to hear everybody. Even if you're not in the working groups, at least we have your points or your views on some of these points. How do you want to go ahead with more kind of free flow Q&A? Any views?
I think we can both, if you want to stay, we can do it together. Okay. So we're opening this up now. We've got half an hour before drinks. We can use all that time. We can use less of that time.
15 minutes, we were running late.
Finishing it.
We were supposed to finish at...
A logistical question here.
We'll finish at 4:30.
No, so I'm right, as always. Not always.
Luck is helpful. Sometimes.
Yes, if my partner could hear me, she would really be frowning. Again, this is the opportunity either to comment on the poll. I thought there were some interesting takeaways from that. Or again, just hit us with questions that either we've covered or haven't covered. So we have microphones available, to circulate. So here we go. And be careful if nobody says anything. I'll just select randomly from the audience because I know most of you, and I'll target by name people and force them to ask questions or comment on things.